She didn't belong here, at least that's what they thought. With her faded olive jacket and a rifle older than most of their trust funds, Harper Lane stood as a quiet defiance against everything Hawthorne Elite Range represented. The receptionist's sneer was a razor's edge. VIP lanes aren't for the lost and confused, he said, loud enough for the crowd to laugh. One spoiled kid smirked. They letting in janitors now? Harper said nothing. She handed over a worn VIP pass, one earned not with privilege but with blood and loyalty. As the scanner beeped green, the laughter turned to murmurs. But Harper wasn't there to argue. She was there to shoot. Inside, the air buzzed with gunpowder and pride. The walls lined with the names and faces of champions who had never known a struggle like hers. Phones lit up as members began their digital assault. Captions mocking her rifle, her jacket, her very existence. But Harper's hands stayed steady. As the crowd's jeers grew louder, one thought echoed in her mind. Let them laugh, because in a few moments, laughter wouldn't be the sound echoing through this temple of privilege. It would be stunned silence. What Harper was about to do would change everything. At 23, Harper Lane was a quiet storm, her beauty raw and unadorned. Auburn hair, pulled into a loose braid, caught the sunlight like embers, while her hazel eyes, sharp and unyielding, held a depth that could unnerve even the most confident gaze. Draped over her shoulder was an old M1 Garand rifle, its worn wooden stock polished by decades of history. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a legacy. Her father, Colonel Thomas Lane, had been a sniper whose name was whispered in the annals of warfare. A man who resolved conflicts with a single, precise shot. He had raised Harper with the same discipline, teaching her to breathe with the trigger and treat every bullet as a promise. After his passing, she vowed to carry that promise forward. But today, at the gates of the Hawthorne Elite Range, none of that mattered. All they saw was a thrift store aesthetic, a faded olive jacket, scuffed jeans, and a relic of a rifle. Her presence was an affront to their world of opulence and exclusivity. Derek, the receptionist with a haircut as slick as his sneer, stood barring her path. His voice, dripping with disdain, cut through the murmurs. "This isn't a range for the ordinary," he said, his eyes darting to her rifle and back to her face. "VIP lanes are for members, not whatever you are." A ripple of laughter followed, ignited by Connor Blake, a hedge fund heir draped in a $4,000 tracksuit. "They letting in janitors now?" he called, leaning lazily against a pillar as the group around him chuckled. Harper's fingers brushed the edge of her VIP pass. The card was worn, its edges frayed, a token of her father's enduring respect within the military. She handed it to Derek without a word, her voice as steady as her aim. "I'm a guest." The scanner's beep was loud in the silence that followed. Derek's smirk faltered. He stepped aside, muttering, "This has to be a mistake." The crowd parted reluctantly, their laughter turning into sneering whispers. But Harper walked forward, through their mockery and disdain, her silence a shield. Inside, the grandeur of Hawthorne unfolded, a cathedral to competition and privilege. Black marble floors reflected the glow of digital scoreboards, and leather armchairs cradled the elite as they sipped overpriced lattes. Phones lit up as members began a digital trial, their captions merciless. "Welfare shooter. A joke. Bet she stole the pass from the trash." One voice cut through the murmurs, louder and sharper than the rest. Vanessa Cole, a senator's daughter, sneered into her live stream. "Look at her, thinking she belongs here." She gestured mockingly at Harper's jacket. "This is Hawthorne, not a salvage yard." The laughter erupted like gunfire, relentless and coordinated. A congressman's son shouted, "Kick her out." Someone else added, "What's she gonna do? Polish the targets." A trust fund kid, Tyler Reed, lounged in a chair, his $12,000 custom rifle gleaming at his side. "Even the cleaning staff gets access now, huh?" he jeered. Through it all, Harper's hands stayed steady, her hazel eyes fixed forward. She didn't flinch, didn't argue. The weight of their words might have pressed against her, but it didn't crush her. She was her father's daughter. And in the next moments, she'd remind them all why silence could be sharper than any insult, and why precision could silence any doubt. Harper stepped over the spent casing, her face serene, her silence a fortress against their venom. The room buzzed with disdain, but she moved with calm precision, as if she were the only one there. Professor Laura Vance emerged from the coaching staff, her tailored blazer pristine, her diamond earrings catching the light like tiny daggers. She addressed Harper with a voice that oozed false pity, projecting for the benefit of the audience. "This is highly irregular," Vance announced, tilting her head in mock sympathy. "Hawthorne is for trained professionals, not charity cases carrying museum relics." Her manicured hand gestured at Harper's rifle, the decades worn with a stark contrast to the polished metal adorning the lounge. The crowd murmured in agreement, a few breaking into applause. Vance's words weren't just a dismissal, they were a challenge. "Perhaps a community range would suit you better," she added, her condescension sharp enough to draw blood. "Leave now, and we'll forget this embarrassment." Harper's braids swayed slightly as she adjusted the rifle on her shoulder. Her hazel eyes, deep and unreadable, flickered with something buried. Resolve, anger, a memory. Her mother's hands, visible on the live stream feed, were clenched tight, her expression pained. The insult wasn't just personal. It was a betrayal of Harper's right to be there. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, fueled by the live stream. Comments flooded in, each one another jab. "Who does she think she is? Kick her out already. This is painful to watch." Vanessa Cole, a blonde sharpshooter with an arsenal of advantages, a $6,000 rifle scope, a modeling contract, and the calculated confidence of privilege, adjusted her optics in the VIP lane. She didn't look up as she spoke, her voice slicing through the chatter. "This is a training ground," she said, not bothering to hide her disdain. "Not some low-budget war movie cosplay." The lounge erupted in laughter. The words echoed through the live stream's mic, amplified and immortalized. Harper remained still, her hands steady, her expression unchanging. Nearby, Colonel Raymond Pierce, the head coach and a grizzled ex-Marine with medals across his chest, crossed his arms and glared at her. His irritation was obvious, his patience worn thin. "Do you even know which end of that rifle to hold?" he barked, his tone sharp with authority and disdain. Harper met his gaze without flinching, her hazel eyes steady and unyielding. She answered softly, but her words carried the weight of an oath. "I'll figure it out." The crowd erupted again, their jeers mixing with the soft hum of their phones capturing every second. Snickers filled the air, along with whispers predicting her failure. Ethan Caldwell, the range's golden boy, stood nearby, adjusting his gear. At 25, he had the aura of someone who was born to win. A chiseled jaw, dark curls, and piercing eyes that could charm or destroy. His black tactical outfit was tailored to perfection, and his $60,000 custom rifle glinted under the lounge's ambient lighting. He fired his final shot, and the digital scoreboard lit up. 9.9, 9.8, 9.7. The crowd roared their approval, their applause thunderous. He turned, spotting Harper in the shadows. His grin widened, sharp, predatory, a weapon in its own right. "You sure you're in the right place?" he called, his voice laced with mockery. "This isn't a history museum." But Harper didn't respond. She just stood there, a quiet force, the weight of her father's legacy in her hands. And though they couldn't see it yet, the storm was coming. The tension in the room crackled like static as Harper's steady hand guided the M1 Garand, each shot a punctuation mark in the silence that had fallen over the crowd. The jeers, the mockery, they had all faded into the background, swallowed by the precision of her aim. Ethan Caldwell, his cocky grin now replaced with a tight-lipped frown, stood frozen at the side, his eyes flicking from the digital board to Harper, unable to believe what he was seeing. The scoreboard chimed with each perfect shot. 10. Tyler Reed's arms were crossed in disbelief, his eyes narrowing. "Beginner's luck," he muttered under his breath, but the crack in his voice betrayed his unease. The crowd, who had once seemed eager for Harper's failure, was now on the edge of their seats. Phones lowered in disbelief, fingers frozen on screens. The insults had died. Even the elite seemed to hold their breath as the perfect score continued to build. Harper didn't flinch. Her focus was absolute, her eyes locked on the target, her movements fluid, automatic. This wasn't about proving herself to them. It was about honoring the legacy of her father, the man who had taught her to breathe with the trigger. Shot for 10. The melody played again, louder, almost triumphant. Harper's calm was unbroken. The audience's anger had turned to something else. Respect, awe, maybe even fear. The once ruthless crowd was now watching with bated breath, unsure how to process what they were witnessing. Shot 5, 10. The soft chime rang again, and a headset fell to the floor, forgotten by an athlete who couldn't tear their eyes away from the digital scoreboard. Shot 6, 10. The room seemed to hold its collective breath. The silence was profound now, thick with anticipation and disbelief. Harper stood like a statue, her expression calm and unreadable, even as the comments flooded the live stream. She's doing it. No way. This isn't possible. What's happening? The digital board had become a mirror, reflecting the transformation in the room, in the audience, in the world watching from behind their screens. The crowd's laughter had been replaced by whispers, their mockery evaporating in the wake of Harper's steady resolve. She had become more than the butt of their jokes. She was the storm they hadn't seen coming. And now, the question wasn't whether she would prove them wrong. It was how far she would go to redefine what they thought was possible. "Harper," Coach Pierce said, his gruff tone carrying weight. That was something else. He extended his hand, not for a handshake, but in the way one might offer a salute to a peer, acknowledging a rare kind of greatness. Harper's eyes met his, calm and steady as ever, her hazel gaze unwavering. She reached out, her hand firm in his, and for a moment, the range seemed to hold its breath once more. The crowd, still reeling from the shock of her triumph, lingered in silence. There was no mockery now, no arrogance, only respect. As Pierce shook her hand, his voice softened just enough for her to hear, but loud enough for those nearby to catch the weight of his words. "You've earned more than just this record. You've earned a place in this world." Harper nodded, her eyes scanning the now still crowd. The once venomous faces were replaced with expressions of awe and reluctant admiration. Ethan Caldwell, who had once been the crown jewel of this elitist domain, was now just another player in her game. Vanessa, still clutching her now useless optics, stood rooted to the spot. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, met Harper's. Harper offered no apology, no smirk, just a simple nod that conveyed everything she needed to say. "I belong here." Ethan, unable to resist the pull of his own pride, cleared his throat and took a step forward. His posture was humbled, but there was something more, genuine regret. His earlier cocky grin was gone, replaced by a man who had been broken by his own arrogance. "I was an idiot," he admitted, his voice cracking louder than he intended, the sincerity clear. "You're not just better, you're untouchable." The crowd, who had once been eager to see Harper fail, now stood silent, processing the magnitude of the moment. Their phones lowered, their earlier comments now meaningless in the wake of her brilliance. The live stream had exploded with praise. "She's a queen," one comment read. "Harper is a legend." The comments flooded in, faster than the moderators could keep up, while her perfect score continued to burn on the board. Coach Pierce nodded at Ethan, his tone now commanding. "Mr. Caldwell, your scores are no longer the standard. Step aside." Ethan's shoulders slumped, the weight of his defeat settling into him, but his gaze never left Harper. There was something almost reverential in his eyes now, as though he had witnessed something extraordinary that had reshaped his perception of skill, of pride, of who truly deserved to stand at the top. Harper, for her part, said nothing in response. She simply smiled, a faint, almost imperceptible curve of her lips, but to anyone who knew how to read her, it was a smile that carried everything: strength, grace, and quiet confidence. The crowd erupted into applause, But it was no longer about Ethan's fall. It was about Harper's rise, her quiet defiance in the face of every insult and obstacle, and her ability to turn their mockery into the very fuel that powered her to victory. Ethan finally stepped forward, his voice low, almost reverent as he said, "I was wrong. You're incredible." Harper nodded, her smile softening, catching him off guard with its warmth. There was no smugness in her expression, no triumph over him, only the recognition that she had surpassed their expectations, not because of who they were, but because of who she was. The live stream buzzed with the final surge of comments. "He's done. Harper just became a legend." The world had witnessed the fall of one and the rise of another, and it was undeniable. Harper had rewritten the rules. I just want to say," the young athlete began, her voice quiet but growing with courage, "that I've never seen anything like that. You've changed everything. You've shown us what real strength is." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. Harper, still standing tall with a quiet grace, offered the athlete a small but genuine smile. "Thank you," Harper said, her voice steady but warm. The words were simple, yet in them, there was an acknowledgement of what she had accomplished. Not just for herself, but for all the others watching, waiting for a reason to believe in their own strength. The young athlete took a step forward, her hands shaking slightly as she held out a signed range plaque. "I think you deserve this," she said, her words almost shy, but filled with deep admiration, "for inspiring us all." Harper reached out and accepted it, her fingers brushing against the plaque's cold surface. "It's not about the records," she said, her eyes lifting to meet the faces around her. "It's about never letting anyone make you feel small. Stand up, even when they try to knock you down." The young athlete nodded, her face lighting up as if Harper's words had unlocked something deep within her. As the moment stretched, the crowd, once full of doubt and disdain, now swelled with appreciation and respect. The live stream captured every shift in their expressions, the slow transformation of an entire community. Ethan, still lingering nearby, watched as the others gathered around Harper. His own heart pounded with something far deeper than just admiration now. There was a realization, a reckoning within him that had shifted something fundamental. "Can I really just start over?" he wondered silently, his gaze flickering to Harper as she spoke with another young athlete. The earlier arrogance he had clung to was now a ghost, something he could never return to. Harper glanced back at him, her smile a subtle but clear invitation, not just for coffee, but for something more, a chance to rebuild both of them. And with that, something in the air changed. The scorn of the past began to melt away, replaced by a new foundation. The community wasn't the same anymore. Harper had redefined it, not just through her record, but through her dignity, her quiet strength, and her ability to rise above everything they had thrown at her. The applause had stopped, but in its absence, there was something more lasting. A promise, a challenge, and a future where anything seemed possible. As Harper turned and walked off the range, the world beyond the doors was no longer just hers to conquer. It was theirs, too. As the echoes of Harper's triumph reverberated through the range, it became clear that her story was more than just about one moment of glory. It was a movement that said no one is defined by their background, no one is limited by the judgments of others, and anyone can rise if they refuse to be silenced. Harper Lane's name was no longer just a record in a digital display. It was a symbol of defiance, resilience, and the power of quiet strength. She didn't need their validation. She didn't need their praise. She was the bullet that hit the mark, and her journey would inspire generations to come. Now it's your turn. Have you ever been overlooked or underestimated? Have you ever felt like you weren't enough because of where you came from or what you didn't have? Harper's story is proof that your past does not define you. It's your actions, your heart, and your will that will write your story. So what are you waiting for? Like, share, and subscribe if you believe that greatness lies within us all. If Harper's victory ignited a spark in you, let it burn bright. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Let's spread the message that strength isn't about what we're born with. It's about who we choose to become. Remember, You are the bullet that will hit the mark. It's time to rise.